Welcome to the Author's Chaos. I am SF Rogers.
And I am the Elbow.
And joining us today is the phenomenal Nick Grady. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Doing really, really good. Why don't you tell us what you've been up to?
Obviously, I'm still working as a full-time teacher. I'm not a full-time author at this point, but I've been, just recently published the third book in my trilogy. So I have this trilogy of thrillers here. The first one, Under the Bluffs, came out in April of 2023. The second book in the series, Under the Water, came out in April of 2024. And just on April 29th, I put out the third and final book in this series, Under the Snow. And this one has so far been doing fairly well. I've done a lot more in-person events in the last year and things like that to try and promote and sell more books too. And then I'm also currently working on a new project as well, which is unrelated to this series that I'm hoping will be coming out this October.
That's awesome. So are we sticking in the thriller horror kind of vein?
The new one is it's a horror novel for sure. I mean, it's at its base, it's a zombie apocalypse, but it's told from a very unique perspective, and I don't want to give too much away because I don't want anybody to steal my idea before it gets published. There's only one other author who's done it that I'm aware of because I researched it. But so it is going to be a zombie apocalypse story, but it's going to be told from a very sort of unique perspective. And I think that people will really enjoy it. It's still definitely got some suspenseful elements and some thriller stuff to it. It's a little gorier than the Under the Bluffs trilogy is because it's more on the horror level of things and a little bit more traumatizing in some of the scenes. But that the new book will be, how do I want to explain it? It's a bit horror, but it's got this kind of adventure vibe to it. There's sort of this quest that happens throughout the story as well. So there's kind of a lot of nuts and bolts to it. So yeah. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now.
Awesome.
After just putting out this one here. So
That's awesome.
How does it feel to move from one genre essentially to another? I know as someone who's only written one type of book, like I only have one thing that I've written. Is it weird to jump over to something that's a little bit different?
It actually, interestingly enough, the new book that I'm working on was I don't know, maybe I was meant to write something more like that because it just kind of flowed out of me. Was not hard to do. And it was really exciting and fun to write that one and come up with the ideas with the story as I kind of went through it and changed things and tweaked things. And I'm still in the rewrites and edits on that one. It's not ready yet, but I mean, it's probably in the, I don't know. I lost count on what draft I'm on now. I went through it a bazillion times, just reading through it myself. Now I'm to the point where I'm on about the 8th time around where I'm letting the MS Word AI voice read it to me so I can catch mistakes and stuff like that. Or if I hear a word repeated too many times or phrase, I can tweak that and do things like that with it to make it have a better flow.
Awesome.
I love the strategy of using the text to speech to read it back to you. That's something I haven't done, but as I've had my books narrated by an audiobook narrator who reads it directly from what I wrote, anytime there's an error whatsoever, she'll read it exactly as I wrote it. I'm like, oh, that's in the published work. Oh no. So, I love that method.
Yeah, it kind of works the same way for me because what I noticed when I wrote Under the Bluffs, which this is probably the book that I've done that I republished the most of any of them because obviously I didn't know what I was doing. I was thinking back actually to the first time that we talked, and this book had a different cover then, and we were talking about book covers and things like that. And I thought that the original cover was cool, and now when I look at it, I'm like, oh. We ended up with this new cover, and the original version of Under the Bluffs wasn't formatted very well because I didn't know what I was doing, and I got some help with another author on that. And then that same author helped me with the second book, and then he got too busy, so I hired somebody for the third one. But the one thing I noticed that when I was doing the second book, I started using I would read through the book myself, and then I would read through it out loud to myself.
Yeah, Aaron says I use Word to read my writing out loud, and that helps me massively to
Yeah,
spot
and
things.
so when I did it with the second book, just before I released the second book, about 2 months before, and I was going through it, and was like, wonder what it'd be like if I let the AI read it to me, because somebody mentioned that on social media somewhere, and I did, and I caught a bunch of mistakes. And so then I went back and I looked at the manuscript of this one, and I caught a bunch of things that I'd missed as well, and was like, oh, let's update this one again too while we're at it. And so then I did that. But then by the time this one came out, I was pretty satisfied with how it turned out, and I still am. And this one, I feel like I worked even harder on with that kind of stuff to make sure that the editing was really good and things like that. Because, like I said, the first book around, you're kind of feeling things out. You don't, especially self-published, you don't entirely know what you're doing. You want to do the best job that you can, but you're going to make some mistakes along the way. So,
Yeah.
Right.
that's not to say that the second book or the third book are perfect, because nothing's ever perfect. But I think that they're both written better than the first book, and I think they have a better flow to the prose and things like that.
Yeah.
Mhm. And everybody grows in that, I think. The more that you write, it's kind of like working out your muscles. The more that you write, the more that you get yourself even into different genres or just practice writing, the
Yep.
better your stories get as time goes on.
Yep.
So can you kind of give us the synopsis for Under the Snow?
Yeah. So basically, the third book takes place 2 years after the second one. So it's still set in, this one's set in 1996. The first one's 93. The second one's 94. By the time this story comes out, the characters have developed a little bit. They've grown up a little bit, especially the younger two. So Ron's still a detective. Officer John Wallace, who kind of becomes a bigger part of the second story, is still working as a cop, but he's part of the canine unit at this point, because I don't know if you guys have read the second book, but there's a dog in the second book, and Wallace sort of finds this dog, and there's this whole thing about the dog, so he gets involved with the canine unit. But by the time this book comes out, the two kind of side characters, kind of the heart of the story, Tony and Jeff. Tony's become a full-fledged police officer, and Jeff is working as a firefighter and an EMT. And so the whole story starts with Tony kind of getting called to this. He's been a beat cop for like 6 months, and he gets called to this crime scene that's rather gruesome, and has to report it in. And there's an investigation that takes place, and he goes to meet up with Ron and Jeff and Wallace for happy hour afterwards. And he starts telling them about the crime scene and what was seen at the crime scene. And I'm not going to tell you too many details about that because it'll take away some of the fun. But basically, when he starts telling the story, Ron's face kind of just turns white. And Tony's like, Ron, are you okay? What's going on? And he's like, this has happened before. And he's like, what do you mean this has happened before? He's like, I dealt with a case back in 1973 that's identical to this.
Oh,
And
wow.
what? And he's like, yeah. And so then he starts telling them about this case from 1973, and we kind of go into this whole flashback into Ron Clark's earlier days as a detective, and we learn about what happened with this case. And then it kind of brings us back into modern times, where they're trying to investigate the current um, uh, serial killer situation and see what's going on with it. And they're convinced that it's some sort of copycat killer that either has some sort of vendetta against Ron, or is somehow tied to the previous case, but they're not really sure who's behind it yet. And it's a harder case to solve in this one, because the people that are being unalived are disappearing from other parts of the state. So they're disappearing from up in northern Minnesota, up by Duluth, but the bodies are being found down in St. Paul, displayed in the same way as these killings that took place in 1973. So that's kind of the gist of kind of where the story goes, and there's some plot twists along the way and all that kind of stuff.
That sounds really, really interesting. I loved when we talked to. I think when we talked to the first time, you had just released Under the Bluffs.
Yeah.
We talked before we started recording here, but what was the process like? Because when we talked about Under the Bluffs, it was, you thought this was going to be a one-off story. How did this spiral out into becoming a trilogy like it has?
Well, so it started with part of it was that the first book was actually more successful than I had ever imagined. Like, not that it's been like hugely successful, but I mean, it sold way more copies than I ever would have dreamed of. It's in the it's approaching 600 copies sold at this point. So, which to me was, so it's not huge, but that's a lot to me. So,
Yeah.
and people were giving it really good reviews, and people were telling me you should keep writing it. And so little ideas came to me along the way, some from fellow people on social media. Another author, I was talking about possibly working on a sequel, and one author had said, I'd love to hear a backstory on Ron, which is how that got into the third book. But the second book, I had this idea about this, like, sort of, I wanted something to do with some sort of like demon worshiping cult. And I wanted it to be another like mystery, but different from the first one, still having a little bit to do with the caves, but not as much. But I wanted to have this thing about a cult. And so I kind of started getting ideas for that. And that's how the second story kind of came into development, was I started thinking about this idea about this cult who's attacking people along the river parkways in Minneapolis. And, oh, how do I bring Ron into that? Because he's a St. Paul cop, but how do we do this? And, how do we do that? And so it eventually just kind of started flowing out of me. And it was, by the time it was done, it was a much different story than I had originally planned. There were characters added that I wasn't planning on added, and twists added that I wasn't sure about. And then the third one actually came about. My wife is really good at throwing ideas at me that I use. So the big plot twist that happens in the first book, that was her idea. And I hadn't written in who was going to, I don't want to say anything, but I hadn't written that plot twist into it at that point. And she said, what if this happened? And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And then I had to go rewrite the whole book. But then with this one, she said, what if there was a serial unaliver who did this? And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And I already have this idea for this backstory on Ron that I think I'm going to put into the third book. And I can tie those two things together, and we can do this whole flashback that has to do with those things happening in modern times, and I can come up with a story for that. So that's kind of how I came up with the third one. But yeah, originally it was just going to be this book. I didn't know if I'd ever write anything else. And then it just, like, I don't know, I just got inspired to do another book. I think, actually, I'm trying to remember, this one I actually started writing really quickly after I wrote the story for Last Stand of the Sun. In fact, as I was writing Last Stand of the Sun, I think I started writing this one because I was getting like the writing vibe going again. And so, yeah. And then the new book, I just had like basically a list of like bullets of like different story ideas. And I went with the one that felt best to me at that time for the one I'm currently working on. So yeah. So it just kind of came about like that.
It's crazy how our daydreams have turned, like, taken on a life of their own, and then they just start walking, and you're like, hold on, let me write down what you're, hold on, don't move very fast, I have to write all this down. Like,
Yeah,
how one idea just spirals.
when I come up with an idea, I just pull out my phone and I type it into my like Samsung Notes notepad that's just my story ideas, and I go, story about blah 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 blah, this happens, this happens, this happens, and then I save it, and then I come back to it later. And so I've got like a few, probably another 5 or 6 ideas. I don't know if any of those will actually become books or not, because the one I'm currently working on, this new sort of zombie apocalypse thing, if it does well, I have ideas for sequels for it. I don't know if it will be another series or not. I don't know if I want to do another series, because the one tough thing about a series is you have to hook people with that first book enough that they want to buy the next two. And that has worked. I've had a lot of people I've had more people read this one than the second one. This one's probably sitting at around 150 copies sold and a lot of KU pages read. And this one is definitely selling right now, but it's hard to get people to hooked in. The one thing I have noticed that's kind of cool that I didn't expect is that now that the third book has come out, there have been a few times where I've noticed that all 3 books have sold at around the same time, which means that somebody probably bought the entire trilogy at once, which is kind of cool to see.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I seem to see a lot of that happen when, even with just my 2 books, now that I have 2 out, I will generally have it's like a 1 to 3 ratio of people who will buy either both together or they'll just buy the first one. And so I usually keep more of the first one on hand than I do the other, especially for like massive, big in-person events, stuff like that.
The biggest mistake I made, the last in-person event I did, I had, I think I brought more copies of the third book because I knew there were people that had read the first two that would want to buy it.
Mhm.
And then I brought the same amount of the first and second book. Well, I did have a lot of people buy the third book that didn't have it yet, so it was good to have those extra copies. But by the end of the event, I had brought 50 copies with me, and I had 3 copies of the second book left. And I was like, man, if I just had a few more copies of Under the Bluffs, I probably would have gotten rid of these, and somebody would have bought the first two and then found the third. So this time around, I ordered. I got another one coming up in July, and I ordered 40 copies of the first book and 30 of the second and 30 of the third, so that I'll always have like, because there were people who were like, well, I'll try the first book, and if I like it, I'll buy the next two. And I was like, I should have more copies of the first book. So I almost sold out, and still, I'm not complaining. 47 copies in like 3 hours was ridiculous. That was absolutely insane.
The first author that my sister and I ever talked to in person at Third Thursday, she has like 30 plus books published. And her piece of advice was like, if you have sets, take those first 2 books because you will sell more of those. And then she's like, when you get a set finished, if you can do an omnibus version, she goes, you will either sell the first 2 or people will buy that whole big old book with the whole series in it because they either want to have all of it or they want to start it and see if they like it. And I will never forget her telling us that, like, ever.
Yeah, at some point, that's the plan here. I would like to put these all into one volume at some point. That's going to be a thick book, but
Yeah.
over 600 pages. But I haven't gotten there yet.
But people who want the whole series will purchase a book that big.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they will. Yeah.
It's a lot easier to be like, oh, this is actually 3 books in one, rather than say, well, this is actually 300,000 words in this
Right.
book. It's,
Right.
it's hard to swallow.
Right.
Right.
You've written them in pretty quick succession.
Yeah.
How long are your books generally? Like, do you have a word count number for us, like indie authors, or do you have just a page number that you know?
I mean, the page-wise, they come out to be the second book's a little bit shorter. The first one, this is an older version, but I think it's around 210. The second book is just at about 200. The third one has the highest word count, but it only came out to be, the print version came out to be 205 pages long. So word count wise, we're probably talking about, with each book, they're a little bit shorter, so probably around 65,000 words each. So they're not like super long books. They're short, quick reads. The one I'm currently working on is closer to 80,000 words. So that's going to be around 200. Well, the way I have it set up right now, it's at 239 pages. So it'll be a little bit.
Well, and you've read mine. Origin sets at like 77,000, and I think Odyssey is 104,000. And
Yeah.
that's nice at times, but I feel like it's really intimidating to see a book that thick sometimes and want to pick it up. It's nice to get one that's a 50, 60,000 word thing that you can crack through really quickly.
Right, right. And I tend to do that with a lot of books. Like, I mean, Odyssea, obviously I wanted to read because I loved the first book, and I loved Odyssea as well. I like both of them. They're both great books. I love the tying in the elements of the Odyssey into the second book and doing that whole thing with it was super fun because I love the Odyssey. So it's like, oh, they're going through the river Styx kind of thing now, and oh, they're doing this, and oh, there's the Cyclops, and like it was amazing. But like most of the books I read are around 250 to 350 page, 300 page books. I'm currently reading Atlas Creed's book Armitage, and I'm about 70 pages into that one. And then the next book I'm reading is a book by actually a college classmate of mine. When he started seeing that I was publishing, he used to write a lot too, and he was like, "Should I do this? I have a lot of ideas." And I was like, "Yeah, you should do this." And so his book came out, so that'll be my next read. So I wanted to, when I wrote the first book, I wasn't quite sure what type of audience I was trying to reach. I actually thought I was kind of writing like a teen novel because they're a little bit more simplistically written. But it turns out that I was reaching an adult audience most of the time with them, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm writing for adults then. So, like at my wife calls my fan base the little old ladies because every time I do an event, all these little old ladies show up and they buy my next book, and they're like, "Oh, I love the first one." Uh,
It's so funny that you say that because we did an event, we did Cowtown Days not too long ago, and the amount of people who like are 65 or older that were like, "Well, do you have any thriller books?" I'm like, "Oh, well, I don't write anything like that, but I know some people who do."
yeah, yeah.
We're like,
The
check
old
out
ladies
this
love-
person.
Yeah, because these are not like my books are not. They're not cozy mystery. You know, it's not what you'd expect.
Yeah.
Like a woman in her mid 70s to be reading like because they're dark, they're creepy.
There
They
was
get
literally, when I was reading Under the Bluffs, there was literally a moment where I had to put my Kindle down and I looked at Davey and I was like, if I don't stop right now, I'm going to have nightmares because I'm claustrophobic and he's talking a lot about being in this dark cave and not being able to find a way out. And Davey was like, are you okay? I was like, no, my heart is pounding out of my chest. Like,
then I did my job.
yes, yes. So we always we like to ask, and like the piece of advice you've given. What's your favorite piece of advice? What's something that you would tell an author to, like a first time author, to avoid?
Um, let me think on that for a second. Something
Yeah,
to tell a
feel free.
author to avoid. Um, I would say to avoid maybe not reading depending on how strong their stomach is, but I would tell them to avoid reading the reviews of their books or taking too much with that because there's a lot of different types of books out there and there's a lot of different types of readers out there, and just because somebody gives you a negative review doesn't mean that your book is bad. It just means that person didn't like it. Even if they attack your grammar or whatever, it doesn't mean the book is bad, because for every one person that doesn't like it, there's going to be people who love it, so that would be the one thing. Or just ignore your reviews entirely because they're not really for the author. It's not like the person's rarely is it a review where somebody's literally directly like attacking you and being like, why did you write this book in the review? It's usually just like they're like, I don't like it, so that would be probably the main thing that I would think of.
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice. I think a lot of times it's hard to not, when you see a new review pop up, it's hard to not go in and read it and think, okay, how did they like this? Your brain wants to be optimistic about it, but like most of the time when somebody is coming to review your stuff, they're going to be honest. And I prefer honesty over fluff, but it's also not the best thing for self-esteem sometimes.
Not at all. So I saw a thing this week where an editor was like, hey, avoid the editing loop where all you do is go back and edit a chapter. You don't move forward. You don't finish the first draft. You just keep editing. And I know, like I've told both of you before, that when I was reading or when I was writing Extra to Bottom, like I had a really, really bad habit of going back and trying to edit those chapters before finishing. So I when reviews time coming up, I do have to avoid reviews. I'm like, nope, I put it in the universe. You interpreted it how you interpreted it, like, because I will continue to edit EOA and just have copy after copy just redone, like.
Yeah, for me, that was another piece of advice that I always tell authors. For me, is like one of the reasons I was able to get, like, I wrote for a long time before I put out Under the Bluffs, and I would get something started and never be able to finish it. I'd get something going and then I'd get stuck in the middle of it. What I figured out for me was my problem was that I would get stuck in those editing loops. So I'd start writing, I'd get 3 or 4 chapters in, and I'd keep just editing those chapters over and over and not move forward. And I learned that I have to actually just hammer out an entire first draft and not worry about anything until it's done and deal with continuity and things like that later. Otherwise, I'm just not going to finish it. So for me, I have to get through the whole thing before I can start editing. Unless I catch something on a page as I'm writing it, I will go back and do all that later.
Yeah, I think avoiding the edits as you go through is extremely important, just because editing takes time, and editing is the thing that feels like work. I don't
Yeah.
feel like writing feels like work for me, but editing feels like work. And so if you do too much of that, you drown in that editing process and you can never get out. So that's another thing to consider. And I'm glad Sarah brought that up because it's something that so many people get stuck doing because you read a paragraph and you're like, oh, this is garbage. And you redo it. And you're like, oh, this is garbage. And you redo it. And it just keeps going and going and going. So bad.
Right.
I just Edie Small's comment there. Yeah, I read one of his books of short stories recently. It was pretty good.
Yeah. And AD is a big fan of the podcast. We love having AD around. He's constantly on these. So.
Awesome. He's awesome. All right, Nick, you said that you were working on maybe a zombie book, looking at it for October.
That's what I'm
Are you super stoked about this? Like, are you like really ready to like venture out after ending Under the Bluffs trilogy? Like, are you excited? Are you nervous?
I'm excited and I'm nervous because I don't know how this particular story is going to be received. I don't know if the people who are fans of my previous books are going to like it or not. I have one friend who is ARC read, or I should say beta read probably most of my, she's read everything. She always gives me like feedback and stuff. She's a really avid reader. And she's the one that said, you know, she loved Under the Bluffs. She gave me a lot of things to tweak on this one. And this one she said is her favorite in the Under the Bluffs series. And she's currently reading my sort of zombie book. And she's telling me what she thinks. And she hasn't given me like a full breakdown yet, but she's enjoying it. So that's good because she was a fan of my previous books and she's a fan of what I'm currently doing. She thinks it's a fun read. So I'm like, okay, that's good. She's enjoying it. So that means maybe I do have something here. She wasn't like, oh, this is, you know, I mean, she never told me it was garbage, but she might be like, you know. So she is enjoying it. So I don't know how it's going to be received because it is going to be a little bit different than what I've been doing before. And it's a little bit, like I said, it's a little gorier. There's a little bit more violence in it than the Under the Bluff series has. There's some somewhat traumatizing scenarios in a couple parts of it. Nothing too intense, but nothing more intense than the Under the Bluffs trilogy anyways. But yeah, it's a little different. So I don't know how well it's going to be received. Like to the point where it is a zombie horror novel, but there's other elements to it that make me wonder if that's even the right genre to put it in. So it's kind of it's a unique thing. So we'll see what happens. I'll be as I get closer to publishing it, I'll be talking more about it. But I don't want to give away too much ahead of time. Because again, like I have this weird paranoid side of me that I think I've got a really good idea here, and I'm worried that somebody else is going to see me talking about it in a video and like quick write a book and put it out before I can, and that to happen. So, I mean, what I'm doing has been done before at least one time that I'm aware of, but not much. So I think it'll be an interesting, unique take on the whole zombie apocalypse storyline. So I'm hoping that people like it, but yeah, I'm a little scared because it's not like, okay, it's the next Under the Bluffs book. I already have somewhat of an audience for this. I know some people are going to buy this and like it. It's kind of like, here's a new standalone and it's not Under the Bluffs. What do you think of this? And kind of throwing it out there. So yeah, a little nervous about that one, but I'm still going to put it out.
And maybe you can jump out of the old lady demographic for your little old lady demographic for your new book. You know, get a little bit something else on that side and still retain that Under the Bluffs fan base that you have.
Oh, come on. His entire fan club will just keep him going. Like his entire old lady fan club. They'll be crocheting, listening to his thriller now.
Well, that's exciting. I'm glad to hear that you're writing more. I knew when you talked to us the first time that it was like, oh, I wrote this, and I'm hoping it's well received. I've sold a few copies of it for Under the Bluffs, but I'm really glad to see that it spiraled out. It's kind of one of those things with writers in general. You'll notice that they will write something, and it's really hard to stop writing after that. Do you feel like that's happened to you?
Yeah, I gotta be. It's like ever since the first book came out. I mean, I think it was. I think I started writing the second one. The next book, KJ Davis, in response, my new book, not the End of the Bluff trilogy, the new book that I'm working on, my work in progress is going to be a space novel. So Sorry about that if there was any confusion there, but yeah. So when I finished the first book, like I said, I wanted to get it out there and see what happened and see if, and a lot of people kept reading it and the reviews started coming in and, I was getting a lot of positive feedback on it. So that's when I decided, I think it was that summer, it had come out on like April 23rd of 2023 when the ebook came out and then the paperback came out. And then I started working on the second book and then I kind of redid the first book that October with the new cover and the new formatting. And then I kind of kept working through the second book. And then by the time that the second book was getting ready to be published, I was already working on the third one. And the same thing with this one. By the time this one finally came out, I already had at least a first draft of this new work in progress that I'm working on. So that I don't have anything else that I've started yet. I want to get this one kind of to the point where it's at the pre-order stage or at least upload it onto Amazon before I start something new. But you never know, something might come to me this summer and I just start working on something new on top of that. But yeah, once I got into the groove, it's like it hasn't, the flows kept going.
Right. We'll have you back on in a year from now with 7 more books under your belt, I'm sure.
Nick's sitting here talking about finishing one idea, and Sarah's over here with 8 whips, so it's fine. It's fine.
Well, and you mentioned changing your cover, and you changed your cover because you designed your very first cover, did you not?
Yes.
Yeah. And so you got an actual artist for the first and second.
Yeah, so I did. So the first book I had originally just, designed the cover using the Kindle Create function, which is functional but nothing fancy. And I had a cover, and it wasn't terrible. But then a fellow author that many of us know who put together this anthology, Christian Francis, reached out to me and said, "Hey, I just got your first book. I started reading and I'm enjoying it." And he's like, "But if I can be honest with you, I think it needs to be formatted better, and I think I can make a better cover for it. And since you're writing the short story for an anthology for me, I will trade off on that." And I was like, okay. He's like, "You can take it or leave it." He's like, "When I send it to you, if you don't like it, you can just say, nope, that's not for me." He's like, "I don't care." He's like, "But I figured I could do that for you." And I was like, okay. So then he sends me this beautiful cover with like the review quotes down the side and with this lovely, nice formatting on the inside. And I was like, okay, cool, man. Thank you so much. And then I uploaded it and we had to go back and forth a couple times because the paperback didn't quite work. And then when I tweaked it, he was willing to send me a new formatted version to upload. And then by the time this one came out, I reached out to him again and said, "Hey, are you willing to do a second book?" And he was like, "I'm not busy right now." So yeah, this time around, I did pay him. He didn't want me to pay him. He kept insisting that I not pay him, but I kept arguing with him until he finally sent me his PayPal, and then I sent him money. So this one. But by the time this one came around, he was too busy. He had too many projects going on, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I just can't do it." And so that's when I started reaching out to other indie authors and saying, "Does anybody know an affordable cover artist or where I can find one?" And Atlas Creed messaged me on TikTok and said, "I have this website, you probably heard about it, called Indie Author Connect." And I was like, "Yeah, I haven't checked it out." And he's like, "Well, there are cover artists and formatters and stuff on there. See what, their rates are usually listed, so reach out to somebody." So I connected with this gal in New York named Michelle Morhaime, who's also, I believe, an indie author as well. And sort of told her, I said, "I got this book coming out. It's the third in the series. I want it to look similar to the other ones in terms of formatting and cover. And here's the first 2 covers. And do you think you can do something like this?" And she was like, "Yeah, absolutely. I can do the ebook and the paperback plus the formatting for both." And she was running a special at that point, so it was ridiculously cheap. And she did an amazing job because I feel like, if you kind of look at them in succession here, I feel like, that's the first book, that's the second, and that's the third. I feel like they all have a very, I feel like she did a really good job of keeping the vibe of all 3 books. So they look like, when you see them, if you look at the trilogy on Amazon, they definitely all have that similar sort of look to them. So I think she did a really good job with it, and she was fast. Like she had that cover like within a couple days. She had a rough version of this and was like, "Well, what do you think of this?" And I was like, "Oh my god!" I wrote her like a couple sentences of what I was thinking. I was like, a snow-covered field, maybe like towards sunset, or maybe the moon in the background with like a forest behind it, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And she's like, "How about this?" And she already had like the lettering with the, with the where you can see the bleed come through and stuff. And I was like, "Yep, that's it. That's perfect."
Yep.
Um,
Well, and I would have never guessed that they were done by different people. They're the quality is so consistent that it's hard to tell that a different artist worked on them. And that's
Yeah.
incredible.
like the inner formatting is a little different on the first one because the previous person used vellum, and this Michelle did not use vellum, so it's a little bit different, but it looks almost exactly the same in terms of vibe and appearance. So she did a really good job with it. So I'll be using her again when this next one comes out. We've already
It's funny how much you want consistency between books, because you have my original cover for Origins and you have the new cover for Odyssea.
Yeah.
And so you can tell that those are extremely disparate ideas. They look so different. So eventually I had to work
cover for Origins better, by the way.
Oh yeah, thank you. My cover artist did an incredible job on that one. I think it matches the vibe.
The first time I saw you post it, I was like, "Oh, that's way better." I was like, not that the first one was bad, but
right, exactly. And it's you learn, and you move on, and you change stuff as you go. Even Sarah's looking at having to change her first cover because our cover artist, quit on us. Yeah. So it ends up being what it is. But it's such a common thing. You just want to be consistent.
Yeah. So yeah,
that was the guy that kind of like screwed you right out of okay.
Yeah, the name which shall not be spoken.
Yeah.
But
talking about.
We got it all ironed out, and I think, as I told Sarah, I think the vibe fits so much better for the new books with these new covers, and the stuff that Sarah is doing behind the scenes of her cover stuff is so it's gonna be good.
I am very impressed with my new cover artist. So Michelle, I can't wait to show you guys. But
I was really happy with this one because I wasn't sure what I was going to get. I mean, the nice thing about her was she has her own website. She had lists of testimonials. She had links to other books that she'd done the covers for, so I could see her previous work or like look up based on the testimonials. I'm like, well, let's see what she did for this author. Okay, let's see what she did for this. And so when she came up with it, and there was a few things that I had her tweak here and there, but really, I mean, it was a pretty quick process with her. I mean, it's a simple cover. It's not like a crazy hard cover to do, but still, she did a really good job with it. And like I said, it matches the vibe of the other books, and I'm looking forward to working with her again. So, and she was, like I said, she was like incredibly inexpensive. So.
Well, and it's such a common thing, for covers to change on books. That's nothing. That's... Yeah. Although covers cost money, I mean, but it's nothing to change one,
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is that all your questions, Daniel?
I think that's it. I think that pretty much covers it. Nick, why don't you shout out where everybody can find your stuff? That way they can hear at the end here.
Absolutely. So if you want to check out the Under the Bluffs trilogy, all 3 books are available on Amazon, and they are listed on one trilogy page. So you can either type in Under the Bluffs by Nicholas Grady on Amazon, or you can type in Under the Bluffs trilogy, and it'll probably pop up there as well. The first book is Under the Bluffs. The second book is Under the Water. And the third book, which just came out, is called Under the Snow. And the trilogy is complete now. So if you're one of those people that you got to have the whole thing done before you read it, it's done. Also, obviously, there's a link on my profile on my TikTok page that will take you directly to the trilogy as well now. I've changed that so that it's the trilogy page as opposed to just like the first or second book. And I've done the same thing on Threads as well as Instagram as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys so much. Nick, thank you for joining us again. We appreciate talking to you as always.
So nice to talk to you guys again. I always love chatting with you guys.
It's always such a fun time to hang out with you. I'm SF Rogers. Isolation of Winter is set to release July 18th. So if you're looking to continue Cora's story, stay tuned. It's coming. And Biker and the Book Dragon should be finished sometime by the end of this year if you're looking for contemporary romance from me.
And I am D.L. Golden. Origins and Odyssea are both available on Amazon right now. I'm working on book 3, and it should be coming out sometime in the next year. Look forward to it.
Thank you guys so much.
Later.